So I had the conversation with Devon Larratt yesterday about biomechanics, arm wrestling, weightlifting, and I thought I will make this video to explain a little bit more on what we were discussing yesterday. So we talked about compound movement, how many people achieved great results with compound movement, great physiques like Arnold, all the legends of bodybuilding. And usually, people, when they want to build muscle, they always go to the big lifts. So these big lifts are originally powerlifting movement, and we usually thought that okay, if you're doing these big lifts and you're lifting the heavy weights, that's perfect for muscle growth. But many don't know that you can still get muscle growth doing the best exercises for each muscle individually. So let's say we call them isolation. There is really not no isolation because there is always peripheral recruitment. Other muscles are involved, but to a lower percentage as compared to compound movement. So uh, if a person does the best isolation movement for a year and do another year doing only compound lift, and the goal, let's say, is muscle building and strength, the results that they get from isolation can be higher than compound movement. And the reason is compound movements are great to lift the heaviest weight possible in a discipline. Let's say if you're a power lifter, you have to do that movement again and again. Now, the problem is some people are using those exercises and they want to compete in bodybuilding, let's say. Yes, it will work, but if you look at how muscle work, the direction of muscle fiber, the resistance curve, the 12 biomechanical factor that me and Devin talked about, you will notice that many compound movement fail at loading the muscle properly. Let's say, example, bench press. The goal is chest, but then you will notice that there are some involvement of other muscle like the front delts and the triceps, and you'll say, yeah, that's good because that's part of the program and I would like to have some benefit. But why don't you work the arms optimally with other exercises and let the chest get the full benefit of the movement, you know? So that's what we were discussing yesterday, and each exercise can be evaluated. There are 12 biomechanical factors that if one exercise meets all the factors, then that exercise qualifies as a 10. So if it fails to meet some factors, then it's not going to be a 10. And that's what is explained in our program. So what we talked about is he should try this method, you know, do these exercises, we call the Brick 20 from Doug Brignoli, and then decide for himself is this is something that is really worth doing or not. Because Devin did compound movement, but he never did the isolation movement that we recommend with the setup that we recommend and with the frequency we recommend. Because another thing that people forget is you only grow as fast as you recover. So let's say if you do compound movement, the systemic fatigue is caused by this movement is longer. You know, it requires longer recovery because you're working different muscles and you're involving other joints, so many joints. So therefore, and arm wrestlers know that it's not their muscle that needs recovery; it's mostly the joints. It takes longer, and it's the same thing happening with compound movement. There are many joints involved, therefore the recovery is longer. So if you work out and you didn't recover from the workout, you know that you're wasting your energy and it's redundant. But if you work muscles with the right grouping during the same session, example, chest and back in the same session, you're using the same joints. Therefore, the recovery is focused on those joints only. You're not focusing on many joints and then the recovery becomes longer. So the program we recommended will allow you to recover faster. Therefore, you will have more frequency. Of course, if a person is enhanced, his ability to recover is faster than someone who's natural. So those are the mistakes that people forget to remember, that you can do compound movement if you're enhanced. Of course, you're going to recover faster, but then you will notice that once you're off that what you're using, you will know that the recovery becomes longer and it's harder to grow. So these are all the details that we discussed. That's why I wanted to clarify these things before you watch the video. So hopefully you enjoy the video. Thank you.
Live here today with Mo from Fitness
Yes.
360. How do you
Smart
say
Training 365.
Smart Training 365. Yeah. So we've been brainstorming all day about so Mo has a training system, and we've been talking about, does that fit in with arm wrestling? How does that work with arm wrestling to make our performance better as existing arm wrestlers, and can it help new athletes coming into the sport of arm wrestling?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting idea that we were talking about is that when you strengthen muscle individually, that will be very beneficial for arm wrestling, because it's not just focusing on the arm muscle only. There are so many muscle involved, and I think you will be the best who can tell us about which muscle are involved, let's say during a match.
Yeah. Like it's interesting because, like, so I started out when you come into fitness, I started out as bodybuilder. Like, my first fitness inspiration was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right? I remember reading Pumping Iron and the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding.
Yeah, I have that book too.
It's a great book, right? You want to know about bodybuilding, that's a great place to start.
Encyclopedia.
Yeah, it's just every bodybuilding motion, just concepts on how to get stronger and fitter from a biomechanics point of view, right? Yeah. And that's where I started, and as I went on, as I got older, I just got more and more into sports and sports performance. But it's always interesting to me because, like, we are all pieces of clay, and so many of the greatest arm wrestlers actually come from bodybuilding backgrounds. Yeah, and it's just it's such a great potential. Like, when you build up your muscles, it just gives you a potential to become great in a field where those muscles are important.
Right.
Yeah. I've spent the last long time kind of thinking about movements altogether. Obviously, ways to make my arms stronger, but the isolation that is very common in bodybuilding, I've kind of let it go a little bit. And through our conversations over the last 24 hours and, known each other for a couple weeks now, I'm kind of at a point where I would be curious to do a little experiment where somehow maybe I'm bringing isolation exercises back into it, just to individually target the muscles so that the individual muscles are getting their full potential workout.
Right.
Which is interesting to me, because normally when I walk away from an arm wrestling session or training, I don't really feel sore in my pronator or my bicep. It's normally like a total systemic failure, or like my tendons and connective tissues are just super inflamed from just all the weird angles that we work at in the sport of arm wrestling. So to me, it's an experiment that I'm gonna start to mess with. So probably for the next couple months, I'm gonna start to integrate these philosophies again. Maybe it's not a step back. It's just kind of focusing on the fundamentals.
Right. Of
what we're trying to build as athletes, and I'm gonna see if an old guy like me can benefit. And I think I like the idea that it can obviously help a beginner, but I also like the idea that it could potentially really help a seasoned guy like myself, just bring it back to really the basics, really the real basics of what we're looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because many people usually use compound movement and like a muscle group, they work together. But isolation movement, some people know how to do isolation. Other people don't know about the Brignoli method, which is Doug Brignoli. He came up with this method of training to work each muscle individually based on the muscle fibers, the origin and insertion, and all these 12 biomechanical factors that we were talking about. So the idea is if you strengthen each muscle at its full potential,
yeah,
and then you use those muscles in a skill movement, like for example the arm wrestling,
yeah,
you will notice that there is more strength as compared to when you use it in a compound movement where each muscle is participating partially during that lift.
Yeah.
So yes, those muscles, they are working together, you're saving time, but if you want the end where you will achieve like full potential of each muscle, you're not saving time. You have to spend more time and like use more weight, which you increase your injury risk with those lifts. But if you do isolation, you're hitting each muscle at its full potential, and then you can use them all together. That's how you will notice that the strength you gain is different as compared to when you use group compound movement.
So instead of a full just, I'm going to be like flexors, extensors, pronator, supinator, I don't know, grip, extend. I'm going to break it down for a bit. Kind of get massive. Pecs and glutes. Yeah. It's going to be great. Huh.
Well, and I think you will notice that these exercises are different. You know, when you try these movements and you compare them to the compound movement, you will only then know the difference, because most of the people, they didn't do isolation movement only for a year and do compound movement, let's say, for a year, and then they compare both. They mostly did compound and did some isolation, and then when you tell them if you do only isolation you get the same strength, they'll say no, it's impossible. But how you can say no when you didn't try both equally for a year?
Interesting theory. Interesting theory, and it's one that I've left alone for a very long time. So I might try and play with these, so I'll keep you guys posted on how things are looking. Yeah, I'll blend this idea with statics and Way of the Giant Pumpkin, and maybe some magic will happen. Yeah, thanks so much, Mo.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up, and hopefully we're going to be able to put together a really nice, clean, neat package for you guys for like, if you're just getting into arm wrestling, this is like your safety package to kind of prepare you for the stresses that arm wrestling is going to give you, so that you can have a good, long, healthy career, and yeah, just do your best to stay injury free. So stay tuned. Mo will be putting that together for us. So good times. Huh.
Yeah.